Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca Rusch, and this is my coach, Tim Cusick, world class, world champion, Olympian coach, my coach. And this is the second session of our Science and Stoke to help you get ready for the Rebecca's Giddy Up Challenge. And whether you're thinking about it or you are already committed, we're going to break down in this second session a little more of your preparation. So we talked last week about kind of getting ready and selecting your hill. You can go back. Those are on my website if you want to review those. And then today we're really going to break down organizing your plan, your equipment, and then the third session we will get into executing your actual challenge. So today is all about organizing and planning for the big day. And I find for me, well, actually, I'll go back to Tim. So Tim's got some homework here and the technical part of it if you want to ask questions. Go for it, Tim.
Yeah, welcome everybody, and thanks for, I see some questions already popping up, so that's great. It's funny, people get skilled at these webinars and they get their questions in early and often. If you're new to the webinar system, we really encourage you to ask questions as you go, because it's going to allow us to answer as we go. It's always tough when you do a webinar and somebody asks a question and then 20 minutes later you see the question, you're like, well, wow, we meant to answer that at that time frame. But some questions will be better to answer it in the end, so we might leave them sit in the mix. I already see a lot of training questions coming up about stuff we talked about last time. I will tackle those, or Rebecca will tackle those in the end. So ask your questions as you go. We'll see them as they come in. I'm watching questions on a screen up here. So I'll kind of watch them in the background and facilitate them if we need to pop them up. You can do so by simply opening the little control panel. It's probably on the right-hand side of your screen. You can use this little arrow to open and close. Open the questions section. It says questions right here, and you can enter your question right there. We see it on our screen. Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to Rebecca.
All right, so Tim provides the science, I provide the stoke. Just as a reminder, you guys, Rebecca's Giddy Up Challenge is Memorial Day weekend, any day that you choose, and there's 4 elevation challenges. So hopefully you are signed up, you're getting your friends signed up, and I launched this to motivate myself. So Tim didn't have to crack the whip as hard to get me training, but also to motivate you and provide an event that we all collectively can ride or run together that weekend, and most importantly, to fundraise for COVID relief. So your 20 bucks is going towards getting us out of this situation. And so that's the background. I'd love for you to all get your friends signed up as well. I've rallied a few people this week too, and we'll all be riding together. So the first thing I want to talk about is why you should build a plan. You think, okay, I'm just going to ride or run as hard as I can, no problem. But for me, especially for an expedition and an endurance type ride, there are a lot of other variables other than just how many watts you can put out or how long you can stay on your bike. And I really find that if you get really detailed about the variables, you can really improve your performance by, I don't know what percentage, but quite a bit. And those are things of controlling the controllables. So all this stuff like your gear, your bike, your equipment, your food, controlling everything so that when it gets really hard, physically hard, emotionally hard, that you don't have to worry about that stuff. You've already got it taken care of because you did some planning, you did some homework. For me, I go into an event, if I know I've got my gear really dialed, I go in with a lot more confidence of like, okay, I did my training, my gear is dialed, you know, and then if something unexpected does happen, you're ready to deal with it emotionally and physically. And it removes stress for me. If I'm not going into an event going, oh, are these the right tires? And, oh, did I pack this? Did I pack that? It just takes away a lot of stress. It's going to be a physically hard event. So don't make it emotionally hard too. And that's why you build a plan. The elements of the plan are the science that Tim's going to talk about, and that's just kind of knowing your body and your performance, and we're going to get into that in a minute. And then I'll go through my bike setup, the support equipment, and all the things that I'm planning to bring for the weekend.
Excellent, excellent. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the science, but to do that, we're going to have to go backwards a little into, one too many, into the last webinar. And if you haven't seen that, it is on Rebecca's site. It will get emailed. The link, when you get the follow-up email to this webinar, it will be linked to you. Her site is, go back and watch it. We showed how to calculate your plan, basically by, picking your event. In this case, we're doing the example of the mashed potato. We found a local climb at 4.61 miles. The reality is the mashed potato is 15,885 feet. The local climb that we found is 1,156. That means it takes us 13.8 reps to climb it. We knew that. Then in this first webinar, we calculated time. We basically said my best climb time on that climb is about 20 minutes. It takes me about 10 minutes to descend it, at not crushing danger speed. And my total time per rep, and maybe a better word there might be lap, is about 30 minutes. I recommend you use about 150% of your best numbers as a target. So I was using, for this example, 45 minutes per rep. By doing that, I could simply take 13.8 times 45 minutes for a total of 621 minutes. And that gave me about a 10.2 hour ride time as my target. So let's just say 10 to 11 hours to round that out. Now, that was your overall, that's your prep. That's giving you, and that walked you through how to create your bigger picture, understand the bigger numbers. Now, how do we build a performance plan? I think one of the things that Rebecca said that is really smart and shows the depth of her experience and wisdom, which is learned experience, learned knowledge, is she's done it so many times. She knows by controlling what she can control and reducing stress, right? And having a plan and knowing how things are going to unfold, you can perform better. So part of this idea is the actual breaking down the performance plan into ways that you are most likely to succeed. For me, we start with that with an overview of this, right? The best way that you can succeed is to break one big goal down into micro goals and then focus on putting the micro goals together, right? Putting them all together in little steps so that all of your micro goals lead to success. Another terminology for micro goals might be milestones, things you want to achieve on your way to the bigger goal. Now, that's great both in a physiological or a psychological sense, meaning it helps you accomplish, but it's also the right thing to do from a physiological sense, the science of what we're talking about. So here's what I recommend, right? You take your, and I'm using this example of the mashed potato. You need to do your own. We certainly, you can follow these guidelines. You can download this presentation right from the same little questions box. You'll see that there is a material, it says handouts. If you download it from the handout section, you can just follow along or recreate this plan on your own later. So if I have my 13.8 reps, right, first thing I want to do is establish a pace and target. We already showed you a pretty good number, right? If your best time was 20 minutes and your best descent was 10, we want to use 150%. Figuring out your pace or target is really pretty easy math there. You basically would take just what you're doing, expand the time range and divide it to come up with speed, meaning if my climb was at 15 miles an hour. I'm hesitating because I don't really know that climb that well, but let's just say it's 15 miles an hour. Well, at, the pace to do it in 45, it's going to take me 10 miles an hour. You can do that by doing the math. Another trick is you could just look at different Strava, just go down the KOM segment or the QOM segment until you find somebody who did it in 30 minutes and start looking at their speed and their power. It'll pretty much give you some good insight, right? So first, establish that pace target. So let's say your pace is you want to climb at 10 miles an hour and descend at 20. Don't be in all of these targets, don't be a slave to the target, meaning this is a general pace. This is what you're trying to do. This is what you're going to average. That doesn't mean every single climb is exactly at 10 miles an hour. Some of the earlier ones might be 11 or 12, and some of the later ones might be 8 or 9. But that's still your general target. Once you have that idea, you know how much you're going to be, how fast you're going to climb, whether it's speed or power. You have a same kind of target on the descent, but let's face it, the descent, you're going to be soft pedaling and recovering. It's going to be what it is. But now take that and break it into micro segments. So the idea of micro segments is, right, I really recommend you break your strategy of completing your 14 reps, like let's round it here, for example, in 2 to 4 hour segments. And I'm going to get into this in the next slide a little deeper. And the reason, there's some science behind that. Physiologically speaking, you have enough fuel stored in your body at your kind of maximal consumption rate for about 2 to 4 hours of work. The reality is it really depends on how fit you are and how much training you've done, how much you've trained that system to store, how big that fuel tank is in your system. But the reality is you have enough stored fuel in your body to operate for about 2 to 4 hours. Now, we want to supplement that, and we're going to talk about that also. So it's good to really be able to framework your microsegments to break them down into segments that better work within how your physiology works. So in a very basic way, 2 to 4 hours. During that 2 to 4 hours, we're going to plan work and recovery. Again, I'm going to break it down in the next slide. And like I said, these are physiological and psychological reasons. Physiologically speaking, it's the best way to maximize your metabolism and the way you burn fuel. And psychological, it breaks the bigger goal of 14 reps, which sounds very intimidating, into smaller, more manageable steps. And then during all this breakdown, you're gonna spend, at first your instinct is to really plan the on, like the lap, like the climb, and you're visualizing. We say break it down into a micro segment, you immediately visualize yourself climbing. What I really want you to do is not only think about the work of each lap, and here I mean the physiological term work, and in the future, in the third webinar, we'll help you break that down. But we're going to break it down into the work, how much work you're doing, into a calorie target and a macronutrient target. But also I want you to think about restoring and replenishing the body. So let's break this down to a little deeper. This is kind of a busy slide, and that's why it's important you download and kind of go through this on your own. So we take our 13.8 reps, we break it down based on the micro segment target. So we know we had 45-minute laps based on 150% of my best. I'm going to say 4 laps per microsegment. That means my ride time per microsegment should be about 3 hours. So that's my target ride time, right? Just about 45 minutes a lap for 4 laps. While I'm in the segment, I'm going to think about both my nutrition and rest as a replenishing strategy, which I'm going to talk about here in a minute. And in between segments, I'm going to think about my nutrition and rest as a restoring function. So Rebecca and I were talking before this, and if there's something I want you to take away from this in your plan is how you replenish and restore. My guess is for most people tackling this challenge, you will succeed or fail on how well you manage your replenish and restore strategy. It's going to come down to you fueling the engine. Of course, you have to be fit enough. You need the right equipment. You need to plan well and have the right gear. But at the core, it's going to come down to the engine and putting fuel and the proper fuel into that engine. So then to help understand that, let's break the micro segments down a little further. The way my segment plans on going here is that, remember, I think each climb is going to take me about 35 minutes. So during that climb, I want to be replenishing. I want to be eating something about every 30 minutes. So as I get towards the top of the climb or the bottom, we'll get more specific into how many calories that should be and some macronutrient targeting in the third webinar. But in general, I'm replenishing every 30 minutes. So one time during the climb. And then since I'm descending and we're resting, I'll probably use the descent to replenish one time during the descent. So during my climb, I want to replenish once, about 30 minutes in. So every 30 minutes, we're replenishing what we're burning. And for an effort, I want to be paced. What do I mean by paced? Remember we said establish a pace target? Stick to your pace target. The number of people who will start out in those first couple laps and be like, man, I know I had a pace target of 10 miles an hour, but I feel great. I'm going to go 15. And then about 5 hours in, you really regret that decision. Be disciplined, stay on your pace target, right? During your 10-minute descent, again, a second nutrition feed, but at the finish, make sure you've done a full replenishment, meaning you've eaten, let's say your plan requires eating 1 piece of food going up and 1 piece of food coming down, right? That's replenish, and that should be targeted by the number of calories you're burning, which we'll get into more deeply in webinar 3. But here, what you should think about is test over like this weekend, right? If you're going on a longer ride, eat more food. Test eating something every 30 minutes. And I'll tell you right now, make it about 100 to maybe even 150 calories, depending on your size. every 30 minutes. It's more food. You need more food to replenish than you think. It's funny, it's something Rebecca and I worked on before she went to Alaska. Do you remember, Rebecca, we were
I
testing
can
that,
tell
huh?
that story. Yeah, I mean, when I went to the Iditarod Trail Invitational last year, I really failed. I mean, I succeeded and finished the race with all my fingers and toes, and I won the women's category, but I felt like my performance was really poor, and I was hanging on by a thread. And a lot of it was I didn't dial in the nutrition because it's so cold there. It's sub-zero all the time, and I didn't have the discipline to eat properly. And so part of our preparation for this year's Iditarod Trail Invitational is Tim made me eat a lot. And we put together a plan of eating like 400 calories an hour, which is a lot more than I would typically eat if it's not minus 40 degrees. But the cold temperatures, and it just was a target we were trying to hit so that I could eat longer. And the race is, it took me 7 days this year. And so my training rides leading up to it, I'd have 4 or 5 hour training rides. And he's like, I want you to eat 500 calories an hour every hour of this ride. And I just like feel stuffed and bloated and like, but I figured out pretty quickly, one, the foods that went down easily enough. And I learned that if I segmented it into 15-minute intervals, I could get the 400 calories in. And so I had to practice with it. And it seemed like a lot of food, but what happened in Iditarod this year is I ate really well for the first 3 days. We stayed on that program, and then it started storming and got terrible, but I had the reserves because I'd eaten well earlier and I practiced it. So you do need to go out with the food that you want to eat and use these last few training rides, one, to even, can you open the package when you're tired? And, I pre-opened a lot of my packages. I mean, those are little things, but start to put your hands on the food and put it in your mouth and see how it feels. And if you're kind of like, oh, I don't like that flavor, or I do like this flavor, it's super important to practice with getting in the number of calories on a really regular basis. It takes discipline. It's hard, but it will pay dividends. I think in an endurance event, nutrition is probably the number one thing that people fail or succeed on.
Yeah. So, and basically, you don't need that many calories because you won't be in the frozen tundra. So see if you can eat 200 to 300 calories an hour. If you can get up to that, because what you're really doing is you're simply training your gut, and your gut is trainable, right? So each up and down, you want to focus your nutrition on replenish. You want to climb at a paced level. You want a light spin coming down. Here's a tip. Don't just dead coast. Turn your legs over in the descent. What's going to happen if you dead coast, particularly if you're eating food, you're going to pull all the blood out of your legs. It's going to go into your stomach for digestion. Not all, but you get my point. Light spin. You don't even need to apply pressure. You could be freewheeling, but just keep the legs turning over super lightly the whole descent. It'll help keep you warm and blood flowing to your legs. At the bottom, in the micro segment, and this is pretty important, short rests. Stop, quick little rest, change a shirt, maybe change your shorts, whatever stuff Rebecca will be talking about. But you don't want to really cool down in the micro segment. You want to stay warm. You've got the engine running. If you keep cooling down the engine and warming up the engine and cooling down the engine and warming up the engine, you're going to struggle a little bit within the session. So for those 3 laps, I want a really short rest, right? And then I want to get moving. And that short rest will probably progress. It'll be progressive, meaning the first, in between lap 1 and 2, you'll probably be raring to go at 5 minutes. By lap 10 and 11, well, that might be more towards the 15-minute side, but don't get too cold. You're actually better off in the segment, in the micro segment, getting closer to 5 minutes. Don't let the engine cool down. Now, when you complete a micro segment, talking about here, there's where you change your focus. Remember, in the micro segment itself, it's all just stay replenished. You just need enough food to keep what you're burning. You need enough rest just to replenish the system, just to, okay, ready to go again, right? But in between your micro segments, you can go a little deeper. Here's where you're going to shut down, and you're not just looking to replenish. You want to restore the system a little bit. You want to put some back. So you want the timing after the 3rd lap, right after you've completed micro segment 1. There you can rest a little longer, between 15 and 45 minutes. Those will definitely be progressive depending on your fitness, right? The first one, after 3 laps, you might be 15 minutes of resting and be like, man, I'm ready to go for micro segment number 2. Cool, head out after 15 minutes, right? By the third one, you might need 30 or 45. Don't let it go much beyond 45 though, because even if you're super fatigued at that stage, things are going to start really shutting down. It's going to be really hard to warm up. So try to stay closer to that 15, maybe 15 to 20 minutes for the first couple. You're better off, but still take the time it takes for you to restore. And that's what I mean by progressive. You might need a little more rest after every micro segment. And you just have to feel your fatigue, right? Don't be a victim of that, meaning like, oh, I'm just tired, I can't go again. But in the same, because that will lead you to cool down too much. But on the same side, if by the third or fourth one, man, I'm really fatigued, err on the side of taking a little extra. Your
I
nutrition,
love this idea of the micro segments, Tim, because one, it gives you something to look forward to. You're like, okay, I'm just going to do 4 laps. And then you know you're going to get a break, and then I could take a longer break. So mentally, I think it's great. But then also, like you talked about the restore segment of eating more, like taking a little longer break after micro segment. And then that's where I will eat more solid food,
yeah.
something a little more substantial. And like you said, you're not asking the blood to be in your legs. You're letting it go to your stomach. You're letting some digestion start to happen by taking a 15-minute break. And so that's where I'll save like my solids foods and something like maybe I'm really looking forward to a piece of pizza or something. And it's like a little victory that you get to look forward to.
Yeah, I think that's great. And that is why it works really well, right? It helps you break it down, look forward to that. And I think in that segment, you said it well, the nutrition is important because there is a mini meal, right? There is, and what we call a meal, it's solid, it's something more robust. It often is something that is maybe more savory than sweet, something different, and you need to have a variety of things, there that your body's going to be ready to eat. The one bit of advice I would give you in the micro segment restore in between your micro segments is eat your meal within 3 or 4 minutes or 5 minutes of getting off the bike. Don't wait to the end of the segment and then eat because you will be pulling blood and hydration into digestion. Eat right away, then relax as you eat and with food in your belly. Make your rest to a blend of passive and active. Passive is what I'm doing right now. I'm sitting in my chair. I'm pretty passive. I'm not burning a lot of calories. I'm chill, right? And it's pretty cool. Active means don't just sit in your chair for your 15, 20, 30 minutes. A little light stretching, getting up and walk to your car and get your stuff, walk back. A little bit of movement is good. You don't want to just be totally passive during that rest time. Blend the two. Light stretching, like I said, is great. Light activation is great. A couple of light body weight squats, a couple of toe touches, stretch those hamstrings, which will probably be the tightest muscles, a couple of other activation movements that you might know. All that works well and will keep you rolling. So in closing for me in the science, know your laps, know your pace. Break that down into your micro segments, have a strategy of replenishing each lap. In between your micro segments, have your strategy of restoring the system. So you're replenishing in the micro segment, you're restoring after the micro segment. And I think if you could just break it down like that, have a good strategy. Like I said, in webinar 3, we'll get a little more specific about calories and food, but that'll get you an excellent start. And the rest will come down to your gear and equipment and preparation.
Awesome. I love it. I did in 24, I used to do a lot of 24-hour racing, and it's a lap format like that. And I kind of had this point, and I told my crew, is like, don't let me sit in the chair. So even if I was eating and taking a break, I would stand up because it's really hard to get out of the chair once you're in it and you start to get cold. And so I would just sort of walk around and eat. And it's also a good time to lube your chain or do any bike maintenance that has to happen and kind of plan for that on your restorative. You're restoring your body, but you're also restoring the bike. But yeah, if you if you really need to sit down or lay down or do something like that, do it. But if you're feeling okay, it's great to stay up upright a little bit, or just have not a very comfortable chair, like maybe a cooler that you're sitting on or something that's easier to get out of. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my bike setup and what I've been kind of trying to dial in for this specific event. Obviously, it's a climbing event, and I've elected to do my ride on Trail Creek Summit, which is the first iconic hill of Rebecca's Private Idaho. It's a just under 1,500 feet. I thought it was way longer, but it's not. So I'm gonna have to do it 20.3 times, and it's 1/3 pavement and 2/3 gravel. And so I'm electing to do the ride on a gravel bike. I'll be riding the Giant Revolt Advanced. You can see here in this picture. And everything that I'm doing on my bike is geared towards comfort, because comfort and climbing. Those two things. And so I've made some adaptations to my gravel bike specifically for this event, and I've been trying them out over the last couple weekends. And so I'm using the SRAM eTap Axis, which is the electronic shifting, and I really like it. And people always ask, oh, the batteries are going to run out. One battery will absolutely be enough for me to do my 24-hour Everesting attempt. I'll have an extra just in case, but you know, I was really reluctant to try electronic shifting, and I have to say I'm pretty sold on it. So and what the mullet gearing is basically like a mix of mountain bike and road, and so I really like a single front chainring, but then I have the Eagle cassette in the back, which is a 1050. So it's basically like business in the front, party in the back, and you get as many gears as you would with a 2x setup. But what I am changing, so I have a wide gear range, but what I am changing specifically for this, I normally run a 46 tooth front chainring, and I think I'm going to go all the way down to a 40 because nobody ever on a massive climbing day wanted bigger gears. You always want smaller gears. And I'm going to be really kind of coasting or just spinning on the descent. So I'm not going to need any big gears. So I'm taking that chain ring down 3 sizes, I believe, maybe 4. I ordered a whole bunch of different chain rings, and I'm going to go try it out this weekend for the last little test run on my bike this weekend. Tim's laughing at me. And so the wheels that I'm running are NVG23. And if anybody's been paying attention to bikes and wheels lately, everything's getting wider. Tires, rims, they're all getting wider. And that's for comfort and control. It doesn't mean your bike is slow. It just really gives you a nice platform. And I do find that wheels and tires are two things that, especially on a gravel bike, you're riding a rigid bike on an uneven surface. And so comfort is really a big deal, and wheels and tires really make quite a difference there. I also, brand new for this weekend that I just tried out, is the NV Gravel handlebar. And what's really interesting about this bar, I really like it. The drops are flared out. It's wider than I would normally ride. So it's a 42, I believe. And the drops are flared. And so it just gives you a much more natural hand position instead of trying to be in real tight like a traditional road position. It allows me to have kind of more of a, not quite a flat bar hand position, but a more natural hand position. What I've also done in that bar is I've got bar fat under the tops and the drops, so extra padding, extra wraps of tape to make sure that my hands are comfortable. So everywhere that your body is touching the bike are super important touch points for comfort. So that's the way I've adapted that handlebar. The tires, I'm running 50C tires, Maxxis Ramblers, which might seem really wide, but again, it's going to be great comfort and control on the descent since I'm riding a gravel descent. And when I'm super duper tired, I want to feel really comfortable. And it's also going to give me a little more push. You know, it's just a bigger surface underneath. So, and then the Coda saddle. Like I said, the touch points are really important. Your shoes are super important. You know, a lot of times people doing long rides will have pressure points in their feet. You may consider a larger pair of shoes. Often I have 2 sizes of shoes, and if my feet are swollen, I'll go up a size. If you just have 1 pair of shoes and you're getting pressure points, you can often take your insole out and that will give you a little more space in your shoe. So as you think about your bike and your setup and practice with it, think about all the touch points, the ways that you can be the most comfortable. Even if you're like, oh, I'm only doing the baked potato, it's only 5,000 feet of climbing, that's still a huge day. And you want to be comfortable on your bike. If you're comfortable on your bike, you're going to go fast. So that's my setup. And then the other equipment. So this picture is how I prepare when I talk about controlling the controllables. This is how I prepare for any expedition. This is my pool table in my basement, and I spread all my gear out. This happens to be packing for the Iditarod Trail Invitational in Alaska, and I spread it all out. I calculate, weather, calories, all the things I'm going to need. I lay it out, I look at it, and then I edit it down and think about what's going to be on my bike and what's going to be in my aid station. And the beauty of this challenge is you're going to have an aid station with your car or whatever at the top or bottom of the climb. And so you can have a lot of extra things, but this is how I plan for a big ride. It goes from clothes, nutrition, everything else. So I've listed here some of the things that I'm taking and some things for you to consider. Any electronics that you're going to bring extra batteries, and even one of the small little battery cubes with your cord that you could, if you had to ride up and down the hill, you could still charge your Garmin while you're riding. That you can always do that. So if you're like, oh gosh, I'm at 2% battery, I don't want to lose track of this climb, you can throw one of those little bricks in your pocket and charge your Garmin on the go. So make sure you've got extra batteries, cords for everything. I like to get real nerdy and I label all my cords with a label maker, because if you're just like, oh, is that the GoPro battery cord or the Garmin battery cord? And when I'm riding and when I'm physically tired, I get really stupid. And so I like to label everything, and it just makes it a lot easier. I'm going to use headphones for some of the time, just for music or podcasts, but I do try to save that for like when I'm really struggling. So I save that. I ride a lot without anything in my ears. But I have that for, the 2, 4 in the morning where I'm starting to fall asleep. Sometimes it helps keep you mentally engaged. I really like listening to audiobooks because that also keeps me mentally kind of focused when I'm sleepy. And then of course I'll be using bike lights. And since we have an aid station, I'm gonna light it up. I'm gonna have a helmet light, I'm gonna handlebar light, I'm gonna have backups of those so that I can quickly just switch them and don't have to charge them. If you are gonna be at night for your attempt, I really recommend a flashing tail light, headlamp, and handlebar mount. The reason for the head is really nice because you want to see where you're looking. If you've got one on your handlebar, it's going to point where the bike is pointing. And the nice thing about having two, it takes away the shadow and creates just a very good visible platform. And it's also a backup. So if one of them fails, the other one still is working. And so I'll be running light and motion lights on my body, Smith helmet, Smith glasses, and make sure you have clear, dark, and medium lenses, depending on what's going to happen. And you know how to change them, but for sure clear lenses at night. And then clothing, Belosio apparel, and I'm gonna have quite a few layers because it's where I live, it's in the 40s at night. Could rain, could snow, I hope it doesn't, but I'm gonna have quite a few layers of arm warmers, leg warmers, little jacket. I plan to have the jacket in my pocket so that for the descent, like Tim said, I can make in my segments, just throw my jacket real quickly, just like I was out on any other ride, and not have to stop and rummage through my car to like get my jacket. So that's my equipment. And then let's go to the next slide, which I think there is, okay, what's in the car? And so the nice thing that we said is you have a car. You're not getting on an airplane. You don't have to edit down your stuff that small. What I will say, and so if you're like, should I take that vest or not take that vest? If there's any inkling in your head of should I, then yes, throw it in the car, bring the kitchen sink if you want. What I will say is hyper organize your car so that 2 in the morning you're not going through, a bag full of all black items of clothing looking for that one thing. And so I will even, like, on a big expedition, or this is what I used to do adventure racing, is I would put in Ziploc bags or containers extra socks, and I'd write socks on it, and everything would be in a duffel bag organized like that. And I know it sounds really sort of weird and overly controlling, but I tell you, when you're physically tired, if you take away that emotional stress of like, oh, I want my arm warmers, there they are right there. And so I'll put all my bike clothing layers in one thing organized. I'll put my bike tools all together organized, and all the electronic stuff together organized. And like I said, labeling the cords with your label maker and all that kind of stuff. And maybe you have a flashlight or something in your car, so if it is dark, you can find it. You've got it all organized. Maybe you've taken out the dog beds and all the extraneous stuff in your car so that you have a really tidy rest area. I will take some bigger bike tools. Of course, on my bike, I'm going to have the small stuff, bike tools, flat tire changing stuff that you always ride with. But in the car, I'm going to bring a floor pump. I'm going to have a set of wheels. Why not? You don't want to do all this preparation and be killing it, and then, have that, that's going to be your little fun aid station. And I'm going to put my rest stop at the top of the climb, because I want the warm layers at the top and things like that. But it also means I'm going to have to ride my hill. I'm supposed to do 20.3 times, but I'm really going to times because I have to get back up to my car. So I'll do a little extra credit of this. And then I'll also have in my car, a cooler with food, nutrition. I'm gonna have some hot drinks because it'll be cold at night. My regular race food. This picture that you see here is how this is actually for Alaska as well. This is how I would line out, basically, how many calories is that? 6. So this was like a 12-hour bag, of calories. So I'd add up, the bag of bacon is 600 calories, and I calculated it all out and would have it organized like that. So you're having your, like, per lap or per micro segment of food, each in a Ziploc bag. So you can just grab it, throw it in your pocket, and off you go. And you'll save a lot of time by being organized this way. It may be a minute here or there, but over the long haul, that's going to be hours. And so really hyper organizing your food, your nutrition, your gear, all in your car in little segments. And it's kind of fun. You can send me a picture of it. I'd love to see who gets the most organized award. But like we said at the beginning, if you control the controllables, this is going to take away so much emotional stress for you. And you're going to be obviously physically stressed. So you might as well make the rest of it really easy. Awesome.
Cool. Great examples. The only add I would say to that, and you said it, it's so key, because you have your car, you're never going to abandon a challenge like this because you had too many things in the aid station. You
Right.
might abandon it because you were missing something. So well organized, but take it with you, put it in the car. Don't create that situation where you're going to be like, oh, if I had that one thing, or I thought about bringing it. Just if you're thinking about bringing it, take it. I think that's excellent advice.
Absolutely. And another reason I'm putting my car at the top, my friend Dave Weens, who won Leadville Trail 100 7 times, I think, the winningest Leadville racer. He has a strategy that he never quits at the top or at the bottom of a climb. He's like, you can quit, but you have to quit at the top of the climb. And sure enough, so that's why I'm going to put my car at the top, because sure enough, you get to the top of a climb and then you have a descent, staring you right in the face. And so it's a little bit of an emotional, psychological strategy for me to put my car at the top of the climb. So I have to get back up to it to stop.
I like it. All right, excellent. We've gotten some really good questions already. So now we're going to go into the Q&A period. And hopefully answer everybody's questions. I'm going to facilitate the questions, meaning I'm going to read them to Rebecca. She might send some of them back to me, okay. But I'm going to read it. So there are a fair amount of blended gear and prep and training questions. So let's start out with question number 1. If my sweet spot average heart rate is 143 beats per minute for 20-minute intervals, How do I use that average heart rate to calculate what my average heart rate should be in the twice baked potato challenge?
That's all you, Tim.
So, all right, I'll tackle that one. Actually, I wouldn't use that as a target at all. I would say you would reduce it clearly in a very general way, and this is where sometimes answering a question can be a challenge. In a very general way, take about 60 to 65% of your maximum heart rate, which is typically just below your aerobic threshold. Again, I'm generalizing, and that's probably a pretty good target as a whole. That really is probably a pretty good target as a whole. Once you start getting above 70% beat per minute for maximum heart rate, so let's say your max heart rate was 200 beats and 70% would be 140. Once you start getting above about 140 beats in that example, you're moving above your aerobic threshold, which is different than your anaerobic threshold. You're actually beginning to burn more carbs. You're changing the way you make energy. Which here you really want what's known as fatty acid oxidation to be your energy source, the way you're turning over ATP to make energy. So the reality is I wouldn't relate it necessarily to a 20-minute power or a 20-minute heart rate. I would relate it to about 60 to 65% of your max. Try not to get over 70% till maybe the last interval or two, because it might just happen. You might not have a choice, but try to keep in that 60 to 65% range for most of your early laps.
I know for me too, Tim, when I do really long events, my heart rate gets really suppressed and the perceived
Yes.
effort is still just as high, but I'm looking like 20, 30 beats lower. And I'm like, I'm trying just as hard. But that's something that naturally happens for me all the time. So I would say too, you can use it as a starting and as a gauge, but often heart rate is not the best factor to go on, because for something really big, sometimes it just stops responding, and it doesn't mean you're not riding well or you're not trying hard. It's just tired.
That's excellently said. Your heart is a muscle, and it will fatigue, and it will suppress as a defense mechanism. Okay, next question. Does it matter if the 2 times 20 SST intervals are on a flat road or hill? Rebecca, do you want to tackle that one, or you want me to?
What does it say? Does it matter if what? I didn't quite hear the question.
Yeah, we picked up an echo somewhere, haven't we? Does it matter if the 2 times 20 SST intervals, which we talked about in webinar 1, are on a flat road or a hill?
Oh, you take that one. That's the science one for sure.
Specificity always trumps, right? It's always the best solution. So if your event is, the demand of the event is climbing, then you should do your training in a climb. Be specific to the event. So I would absolutely do as many of those 2 times 20 on a hill, or if you're stuck indoors, replicating a hill as possible. All right, next question. Course question. Oh, I'm going to let you take this one, Rebecca. Course question. The only restroom nearby is about a 200-foot climb additional 0.7 miles off course. Can I use the additional climb towards the goal, or because it's slightly off course, it won't count? Question mark.
Is it a continuation of the climb? I feel like if you're riding uphill to go to the bathroom, like that should totally count. Like, I feel like that person is being really respectful in the environment. They want to use the restroom. Is it like a hill add-on? It's just past?
I would think it's a hill add-on. I
Like,
would think
still riding, still the same ride though? Like, you don't have to like get off and walk up the hill.
Kate, my answer would be just count it as your lap, and that's your lap. So the reality is you need to do it. But here's what I would do to make sure you officially qualify for the rules. Do it that way every time, even if you don't have to go to the bathroom.
Right. So you got to touch the bathroom every time, and then you'll get credit for it. I actually did this Belly Trail. I did a individual time trial on that, and for it to be official, you had to start at the Slick Rock parking lot in Moab, and then you had to touch the bathroom at Mary's Lake in Fruta, like to end the time. And so I did a video, and I'm like, I'm touching the bathroom to make sure. So yeah, you have to go up to the bathroom every time, and that is your lap. And so maybe you need to go every other time. I don't know. Just don't fall asleep in the bathroom, because I also had somebody do that in a porta potty in a 24-hour race, and her crew was so worried about her, and they're just like, we don't know what happened, and she had fallen asleep in a blue room at like 2 in the morning, like with her pants down because she was so tired. So be careful in the bathroom. Don't fall in.
I'll have to remember that one. Okay, next question. Any advice about planning for extreme heat, 95 to 100 plus degrees?
Yeah, well, I know, just anecdotally, I know my friend Yuri has a vest that a lot of athletes have, a frozen vest you can wear, that you keep cool, and you put it on. It's basically like a little water ice vest thing. You know, keeping all of your water bottles that are filled and ready to go in a cooler with ice, so that you're ingesting cold fluid, and then also putting moist or cold towels on your neck. You can make little ice things in pantyhose, and put those around your neck. So ideally, you want to keep your core as cool as possible. So your clothing that you choose, great, really ventilated, but really you have to actually put cold fluids and liquids and ice on your body. I don't know if it's a male or female, but you can stuff ice in your sports bra, all that kinds of stuff. Tim, do you have anything to add on that?
No, I think that's awesome. You said it great. Keeping the core cool, ice socks and ice vests are an excellent way to do it. And if you're actually in an area that has that heat right now, which sounds like you're in the Southwest, I know Tucson and some other places are just baking. Just get out in it every day from now to your event. The more you acclimatize or get used to it, and it
Yeah.
becomes more the new norm, the better off you'll be during the event.
Yeah, I'd say maybe right now you're riding in the heat of the day, but really hydrating and making sure your water consumption is going to go up, your electrolytes are going to go up based on that. But you might plan your actual ride day to be primarily at night, depending on, or start really early in the morning, so that you're not in the main heat part of the day. Or maybe you want the heat early on while you're fresher, but I would really kind of figure out, based on the temperature of the day, what time you start.
Great point. All right, next question. How long does a typical Garmin 530 last for recording? Question mark. Best way to record if needed, 2 Garmins? Question mark.
So the 530, I don't know, but I know that Garmin has on their website, they have tech sections for everything. I use the 1030, and that lasts 13 hours. But there are some strategies for any unit that you have. Turn the backlight off, turn your connection to your phone off, the Bluetooth. If you can turn a lot of those things off and take the screen backlight down. There's on the 1030, there's a battery save mode that is amazing. It just blacks out the screen really quickly, and you just touch the screen if you want to see it again. And honestly, you're not using your Garmin for navigation. Really, you're using it for pacing and also recording the climb. So it's pretty important that your battery keeps working. I'm going to bring 2 Garmins because I have them. But the challenging part with that is then you've got to merge 2 files, and it kind of creates a hassle. So I'd say a better strategy is to bring a little tiny battery stick or something, and a cord. And if it's getting low, you can I kind of just Velcro the battery onto my stem, or you can just put the whole shebang in your pocket while you do a couple laps and let it charge. But yeah, do make sure you keep an eye on your battery. And I'm also going to record on Strava on my phone to just because I want to have a backup, and I want to get credit for this with my coach. So I'm always paranoid about like the technology running out of batteries, and it's just kind of one of my things. So I'm always kind of keeping an eye on it, but turn everything down. You can also test it out over the weekend, see how long it lasts, but look it up online so that it's 5 hours, it's 6 hours, it's 18 hours. If you turn the map feature off as well, you're going to get a lot more battery life if you turn off the mapping. So, but yeah, go on to Garmin. They have all the tech stuff on there, and you can figure it out there.
Great advice. All right, next question. I do well on liquid calories. Can fluid calories count towards the replenishing while on the bike? Question mark. And
So
then
for
eat
me,
solid
yeah,
foods during the longer break. Sorry, it was a two-part question. Then eat solid foods during the longer break, during the restore phase.
yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to do, and that's how I respond well. I really like Goo Roctane because it has branched chain amino acids, it has calories, has electrolytes, and when I'm really tired, I know that if I drink that bottle, I'm going to get everything I need. And sometimes just when you're tired, just even opening a package or chewing food becomes too hard. So I like to have a mixture of liquid calories like that are my fallback that I know I can always get in. But then I also like to have, something that is chewable. And then you're exactly right. In my restore period, I'm going to have more solid foods, and I'm going to make things like rice cakes. I made a bunch of food for Alaska that we experimented with that I really liked. It was like, dates and nuts mixed together and made in little balls. And I'll probably have, maybe even just like a sandwich or a cup of soup goes down really well if it's cold. So I'll have a variety of what I call solid foods for the little mini breaks that I take after the segments. But on the bike, yeah, I'm going to kind of do my main liquid nutrition. But again, some people don't like that. So whatever you choose, one, make sure you've got a variety, because sometimes you're like, I love Swedish fish. It's all I ever want to eat. And then you just don't want to eat it on the bike or something's happening. So have a variety and practice with it before you go.
Great tips. All right, next question. Gearing, 3450 on front with a 32 in rear. I have a 36. Any reason why I would or wouldn't want to put the 36 on the back? My climb is my climb is 6 to 7%.
I say more gears, more better. Like, yeah, you will never say, God, I wish I had less gears. Nobody ever says that ever. So yeah, if you have the option to give yourself a wider range, absolutely go for it. But test it first to make sure it works.
Couldn't agree more. That's what I was laughing at. What you said earlier was the mullet setup, business up front, party in the back. All right. I see Rebecca includes BCAAs, and you actually just mentioned them, among her nutrition items. Is that really necessary?
Why don't you get some science there? Because anecdotally for me, it absolutely works. And I've experimented with a lot of different things, and I'm a tried and true believer. But why don't you get into a little bit of the science behind it?
So branched chain amino acids are pretty important in the entire realm of training because they are a building block, a rebuilding block, a repair block for microtrauma. So the reality is, yeah, you want them in your overall mix. Now, when you start talking about specific performance, places you definitely want to have BCAAs in the mix is any endurance event, and this is my opinion, and there's a little bit of, not everybody's aligned on this, even though more and more science is coming behind what I'm about to say is the right answer. After, let's say 6 to 8 hours, if you're doing an event lasting longer than that, and I would even say if you're doing an event lasting longer than 4 hours, you want some amino acid in the mix there, and the BCAA is the best selection because your body is going to go, it's going to utilize its available fuel, right? And at some point it starts cannibalizing the system a little bit. Man, I'm totally oversimplifying this, but the reality is you're starting to break down more muscle. You might even begin to, neoglycogenesis, where you start breaking down muscle as fuel and other stuff. You really don't want to get to that point over longer endurance events. That's bad. And, it's a form of whatever, it's bad. So the reality is I would take them into your fuel, and anything over 4 hours, I would definitely use it. In events under 4 to 6 hours, it probably isn't as important, but what we tend not to think about are in-event fuel is, even if you're kind of doing a 4-hour event, you're right on the bubble, having that branch chain amino acids available to the system after, as it begins to rebuild, is also a good thing to have. So the reality is, for me, if the event's under 4 to 6 hours, I don't find it necessary, but it's not bad for a heavy training athlete because it will be available for restoring overnight and getting ready for the next day. For any event over that long, I would definitely include them in your consumption pattern because it will allow for a little bit of protection for your system. You won't break down as much protein within the system, which might be negative to your performance. Okay. Any special tips for doing this on a trainer?
Well, good on you. That's awesome. Tim, you're the trainer expert. I'm pretty new, and I will tell you guys, because of Tim and because of Garmin and Tax, I've embraced the trainer. I always was really reluctant, and it's been a really good training tool for me, even before we all sort of got stay-at-home orders. But it's a great training tool, and I have really embraced it thanks to Tim. But he's done years and years of coaching indoors, so I think you should take this one, Tim.
Sure. Yeah, I guess I embrace the trainer, but get outdoors when you can. Just remember that. Yeah, the reality with the trainer, in one way, you have this really great environment to perform this task, this challenge, right? Because you can totally control your environment, light, heat, temperature, available food, everything, right? It's at your house, it's in your basement, it's in your garage, so it controls that. But that being said, you create, spending that much time in a trainer and a constant effort, you're going to create a lot of muscular challenges being on that trainer. I would absolutely plan in the idea of your micro segments and even resting between laps. I would include a stretching and activation routine almost after every lap, right? In between your micro segments, when you're in that restore phase, the food side obviously will be much easier, but your body's going to take a bigger beating being that locked into the trainer. So I would not sit down. I would walk. I would move during that time as much as I could. I would have my stretching routine in there. I would have an activation routine in there. And for those, I know this is getting a little complex. I would, in all of my activation, I would not be using 2-plane activation. I want multi-plane, right? I want to be moving in different directions in my activation, because what the trainer does to you, even way more so than being outside, it shuts down all of those little muscles that create balance and control. So you really are only using these larger muscle sets to produce power and torque specifically to the trainer itself. And all those things start shutting down, and it's very linear. It's very one plane type of exercise. So do a lot of multi-plane kind of activation exercises and stuff like that. In between do a short version in between every lap, do a longer version, because you do it on the trainer and you're like, wow, I could probably knock this out on the trainer in 10, 12 hours, never have to be dark or cold or whatever. But when you're done, I will tell you, in my experience, you will feel a lot worse when you're done. Your body's going to be more beat up when you're done, even though you'll go faster and it'll be less time on the bike. So get ahead of that curve, stretch, everything else.
Yeah, just move around, and I guess probably you got to load up some really great Netflix and whatever else you're going to be watching for that whole time.
Yeah, it's funny. You can definitely just get through all the Netflix favorites in one day.
Yeah, like a whole series of Game of Thrones, like from start to finish or something.
7, 8 seasons, whatever it is. All right, we're down to 2 questions. So next question, what do you recommend eating and drinking beforehand, and how long beforehand?
For me, I'm planning to start around 10 a.m. So I'm gonna eat a normal breakfast. They do say before races you want to eat 2 to 3 hours beforehand to allow for gastric emptying and everything. something this long though, it's, I don't know that it's going to make a really big difference because like Tim said, your pacing is going to be, brought down a notch. But yeah, if you want to, get up, have a nice leisurely breakfast, I'm going to eat around 8 and then start my ride around 10. But knowing that you can stop, and especially for the person who's got a bathroom at the top of their climb, they could take care of business. But I'll eat a normal breakfast. My usual like race breakfast is rice and eggs and avocado and amino acids. So I'll probably just do that because it's easy on my stomach. I know it. I'm used to it. I'll have coffee, drink some water. But really, I think the nutrition now, like for the next 10 days leading up to it, really, hydrating well, eating salads, taking your vitamins, like you can really do a lot in the next 10 days of just really topping off your own personal nutrition day to day so that you go into the event with all your stores and everything really good to go. But yeah, and then once you have your breakfast, and then once you start, it's a very disciplined approach to every half hour, this many, we're going to talk more about nutrition on the next webinar. But I think now leading up to it, just be as healthy as you can, eat the best food you can, drink a lot of water, and really make sure you go in feeling your absolute best.
Okay, next question, which I agree, great advice. I wouldn't do anything special either. I mean, I would make sure you're not behind. Don't start the event in some type of lowered state, but don't go crazy trying to get ahead. It's just, it's not that type of an event. You're not going to have the intensity that some type of carb load or something like that's going to have any impact, even if carb loading did. Okay. What is the bar tape that you talked about?
Oh, so I use Envy bar tape that's real sticky and pretty cushy. But underneath it, I put this stuff. It's basically just gel. I think it's called bar fat. It's just handlebar gel that you can get at almost any bike shop or order online. And it just is a squishy layer that one provides some padding, but I also like that it increases the diameter of the bar. And if if you're getting any sort of nerve or finger tingling or anything like that, I find that increasing the diameter of the bar just gives you a nicer platform to sit on. And you even see some handlebars that are shaped, with a wider flange at the top. And all of that is to take pressure off your hands. And so for endurance events, I like to use the bar gel underneath and then double wrap the tape just so it's cushy and it's got a wider diameter for my hands. So that's just something that I've learned over the years for me, especially on gravel because it's kind of bumpy and there's a lot of weight on your hands. So if you're feeling any tingling or stuff like that, that may be something to try out. But try it out, make sure you like it and try it out ahead of time.
Excellent. Well, I think that completes the Q&A, and it looks like the board is cleared.
Awesome. Well, thanks you guys for tuning in. Thanks, Tim, for being the science to the Stoke, for Rebecca's Giddy Up Challenge. And for all of you who tuned in, I challenge you to get a couple friends to sign up and go into the pain cave with all of us on Memorial Day weekend. And these webinars are all hosted on RebeccasGiddyUpChallenge.com, so you can go back and review them or share them. We'll put a YouTube link in there. And next week, we are going to really be dialing in more into your event day preparation. Most specifically, a lot of nutrition and some of the other good stuff like that. So I look forward to talking to you guys again. Tim, do you have anything to add?
No, make sure you join us next week as we get a little deeper on the nutrition and the final execution of your big challenge day. And hopefully have a feeling that one will be a little dialed in as nutrition and final stuff, but more questions. I have a feeling that one will be a little more interactive as we get close and we start to really think about the challenge. Thanks
Absolutely.
everybody for coming today.
And giddy up for good.
Giddy up for good. See you guys. Bye now.